Welcome back to Salty Saints. My name is Hayden Holm. I'm joined today by my brother Tanner. We've got a lot of questions to get to. A handful from the Discord, where we game with a bunch of our friends and our dad community from dadsneedfriends.com. And also, we've got one from Reddit that we will be tackling tonight. Welcome back to Salty Saints. We're going to be touching down on everything. I'm joined today by my brother Tanner from why people think it's okay to ask if you're Mormon, if you come from Utah, to if your wife leaves the church, what should you do? So let's get this party started. Okay.
Awesome.
All right. So the first question, this one is coming from our Discord server, and it says, as a member of the church from Utah, living outside Utah, introductions can be challenging. Maybe I'm overly sensitive to this, but my experience is that when I say I'm from Utah, people immediately follow up with, "Are you Mormon?" I have no problem answering this question, but I do feel like the question lacks tact. If I spoke to someone from Mecca or from the Vatican City, I wouldn't ask them directly if they were Muslim or Catholic. I feel like the common courtesy offered to every other religion is to allow people to bring up their religion when they are comfortable to do so. How do you answer this question gracefully while letting your counterpart know that asking someone what their religion is, sometimes in a public group setting, is normally not appropriate without looking like you're offended? So I'll kick that out to you to start. What are your thoughts?
Yeah. I mean, I can't remember the last time I've had that happen to me. When I did, it just kind of, I don't know if I thought too much about it. Because the appropriate response is absolutely, like, sure, I'm Mormon,
Yeah.
I think it actually clears a lot of things up for a lot of people, and introduces a good opportunity to shed some light on things. Like, I had one guy ask me where my horns were in a joking way. It was kind of a fun way to break the ice and let them know that Mormons don't actually have horns.
Nice. Yeah.
But yeah, sure. That I agree. Like that question can lack tact. It's not usually the first thing you want to share with people is your how you connect with God. But hey, it's a good missionary opportunity at the very least, right?
Right. I think if I had to create a response to this that was somewhat like helpful, I would probably say, if someone asked me like, "Oh yeah, you're from Utah," I mean, and I live in Texas, I get this all the time. Someone asks me, "Are you from Utah? Are you Mormon?" I think a great follow up could be, "Come and see." Boom.
I'll never tell.
Missionary opportunity. Invite them to church right there.
Yeah. Well, I mean, there's really only one way to answer that question, which is yes. If you are, if you're not, then no.
Yeah.
But you should ask them immediately after, like, what's your religion? You can ask them, are you Mormon?
Does that open the door to allowing you to ask really personal questions? Like, if they got that horse out of the barn, can you ride it? So what personal questions are off limits at that point? Like, could you ask them like what their weight is or something like that? Like, how much do you weigh?
What's your mortgage payment?
Yeah, that's right. That's right.
What's your salary look like at there?
Yeah. Is that a Tesla I see back there?
Yeah. How much you financing that for, huh?
Yeah.
Yeah. I think that just ask the same question back, and then you get to know them a lot faster on a more, on a deeper level.
Yeah.
Who knows? Maybe they might agree with a lot of stuff, or maybe you'll just find out really quick if you're going to jive with them or not. So if someone says, "Oh, you're from Utah? Are you Mormon?" I'd be like, "Yep, you betcha." And then ask them what their religion is. Do you believe in God? And I'm sure that they'll shut down pretty quick if they're not actually interested in talking about God.
Yeah.
So that conversation will end fast.
Well, and I will read, because David from Sword of Laban, he did submit. We were chatting about this back and forth. He submitted an answer I thought was pretty good. So this is from David. Credit where credit's due. He said, if someone asks you that, you should respond with, "Yes, sirree, dyed in the wool, true blue through and through." That quote from Joseph F. Smith, when that gang was about to like kill him if he was Mormon.
Oh yeah.
So there you go.
Hey, just be proud of who you are. Just be okay with yourself.
Just own it. Yeah.
Just own it. There's nothing wrong with being Mormon.
That's right.
If you feel like ashamed or offended that someone asks you that right out of the gate, then Don't feel that way. I don't know
There
how
we
to,
go. Yeah,
just be okay with it, because we're proud of you for being here. So feel proud.
totally. Totally. All right. Next on the agenda tonight, we've got this one's good. This one it's also from our Discord. It says, "My
Mm.
wife is really burned out. What are some tips to help her?" So, what do you think are some great tips to help out if you've got a burned out spouse? What do you think husbands can do?
Um, more, you know.
Yeah.
First of all, create, like, and this goes for a husband or wife. Um, kids are wonderful. They're beautiful. They're the whole reason for being here is creating a family. But in order to deal with this extreme like feelings, you need to create a certain spherical space around you, like 360-degree, bubble where you
Yeah,
can process your thoughts for a second. So the
totally.
first thing you do is create ground zero. Just create a perimeter,
Hmm.
and make sure the kids don't cross that perimeter. And just give her time to decompress or to process whatever fancy words you want to use for it. Give her some time to like slow down for a second and think about how she's feeling,
And
because if you don't
breathe.
understand how you're feeling, you can't move in any direction that's productive.
Yeah.
So I like to mentally think about that. All right, time to create a perimeter. Time to nothing to see here, folks. Keep moving.
Yeah.
Get the kids redirected into a place that works well, and then allow your wife to breathe for a minute. And she should do the same for you when you're feeling burnt out, right?
So, you're talking about like one day. So, like maybe like in the heat of the moment, like if she is burned out, it's the end of the day, get her into a safe space. Like go
Yeah,
get her out of there,
yeah,
tell her to go like take a nature walk or something like that. Get her some Enya jams and maybe like a soda water or something like that and get her on her way.
yeah. Well, and if you're looking for something more long term, this is something I've implemented, which I've actually benefited a lot from. Is that when your wife has young kids, like really young kids, like
Yeah.
post nursing, but still very small. Um, it's my position that as the father, you should be the one getting up with the kids as much as possible during the night. One, because I think I read an article about men needing less sleep than women. So, and I,
Okay.
I can prove that. Like when women get tired, things get a little hairy.
Say no
you know?
more. Yeah.
So just balance, think about your spouse and you, who can take on different stresses in a better way and worse. For me and my wife, like I don't mind getting up. I can interrupt my sleep without like major impact on me.
Yeah.
And it's extra time that I get with the kids because I don't see them as much during the day. So if I'm there when they're sad in the night, that's extra bonding time I get with the kiddos. I wake up to a very grateful wife and to very, well bonded children. I'm a little tired. Take an extra scoop of pre-workout and you're good. You know,
There you
you
go. There you go.
just go lift a little harder that day and just get through
That's
it.
right. Yeah.
So
Some
there's
gym
little things
therapy.
like that yeah, you can mitigate burnout for any spouse as long as you are very careful and well disciplined. Consistency is key to helping avoid burnout for sure.
Okay.
If you're super helpful for one night and then just go back to not being helpful at all until she melts down again, you're helping nobody. And I've done that before. It doesn't work. So don't do that. you know?
Totally. Yeah. So, I mean, I don't know. When I read this, I think of something a little bit different. I don't necessarily think of like the in the moment burnout of like, hey, it's the end of the day, I got to give her a break. I think more of like you're feeling soul tired. Like on the mission
Mm,
where like your last 6 months of the mission, you wake up and you are soul tired. Like
yeah.
everything is tired. You're waking up, you're physically tired, mentally tired, emotionally tired, and spiritually tired. Like, I think people can get into a point, especially wives, where they are feeling soul tired, where they are just completely maxed out and they need a break. Now, we were talking about this with Timber and I were talking about this, and Timber mentioned something that I think is universal to most wives. I don't want to speak for everybody, but I think in my experience, what I've seen is that a lot of wives they get burned out, but they will not take a break. They do not carve out time for themselves. Where I think it's more natural for men to say, like, if they need a break, they'll take the break. They'll say, "I'm going on break. I'm done. You know,
I think that really bothers
break.
wives, actually, is how
And it
good
does.
men are at taking breaks.
No, it totally does. But they won't do that for themselves, and they get anxious and they get worried about taking a break for themselves. And so the thing is, how do you get around that? You know, it's like, and so as a husband, you're faced with a couple options. You could just sit down and you could say like, hey, I want to give you a break. Let's plan this out and let's make this happen. But that might trigger her into more anxiety and thinking like, oh no, I can't leave my babies, my precious babies, you know, and stuff like that. Where I think another alternative is the idea of, it started in the military, but it's this term called mandatory fun, right? And where it's like, you basically have like this hard date set in stone, and maybe the husband sets this without telling the wife, but he just sets this in stone and is proactively saying, all right, on Saturday, I'm taking the kids. You've got the day off. There's no ifs, ands, or buts about this. Go take some time. You're on mandatory fun time. You know, go relax. Go take the day for yourself, and get your head cleared up. You know, so that you can come back and be ready to fight again. So that's what I would say is just like, if you need to give your wife a break, schedule it. You know, schedule that break, make some mandatory fun happen, and be proactive about it. It's kind of like ministering, where, you know, that question that everybody asks at the end of ministering, where they're like, is there anything we could do for you, you know, as they leave? It's a terrible question. Horrible question. Never ask that question, because everybody, it's too much. There's so much cognitive load tied to that question, because A, they have to think of like all the crap that's going on in their lives. There are so many different problems in their lives. And then B, they have to map that crap in their lives to your schedule, you know, and say like,
and your capabilities,
and your capabilities, which they don't know. And so in order to wrap their mind around that question, they would have to do quite a bit of cognitive work, you know, and that it's just easier to say, no, we're good. Thanks. Bye.
Yeah.
You
right.
know?
Absolutely.
But the best ministers that I've had are the ones that perceive the need and then just ask a very time specific question. So they perceive the need. They're like, hey, you mentioned that your lawnmower is broken. I would love to come over on Saturday and mow your lawn at like 9 a.m. Would you be comfortable with that? You know, boom.
Yeah.
Like, you compared the cognitive load of that question to, is there anything we can do for you? Night and day difference. Use the same approach with your wife is what I would say. You know, like, don't put it all on her to say like, hey, let's get you a break. How do you want to, what do you want to do? Plan it out, give it to her. Here's your mandatory fun. You don't like it? Okay, bring a suggestion. It's just like picking a restaurant, you know, picking the restaurant. Where do you want to go eat? I don't know. Are you hungry? Yeah, I'm really hungry. Okay, we're going to Cafe Rio. I don't like Cafe Rio. Okay. All right. We're going to In-N-Out. I don't want In-N-Out. All right. Okay. Yeah. Right. Where do you want to go? I don't know.
There's a question that I ask my kids when it's chore time and they start slacking off or getting distracted or not doing it. And the question I ask them is, would you like to be managed? You know, like, because I will manage you. If you need to be managed, I can manage you. And then I charge them for management fees, you know, which they do not like. You know, it's not fun to be managed, but it's a life lesson, because you'll always have managers if you're not proactive. Totally. Your wife does not need to manage you. Like, she doesn't want to do that. So if you show up and be like, I'm here, how can I help? Then she just has to manage another person.
That's just another task.
She doesn't want an employee. She wants someone to take the reins and like give you a break for a little bit, you know? Yeah. And so I think you're right on the money with that one for sure.
Okay. And I'm assuming it was physical burnout. I don't know if he meant like spiritual burnout, but I think we'll cover it with this next story. All right. So let me pull up this next story.
While you're doing that, I'm going to read some comments.
All right. Yeah. Let's catch us up with the chat.
Harambe boy wants to know where his cute boy is at. I don't know which one of us he's talking about, but one of us is cute. So
I'm blushing nonetheless.
Harambe boy, that's funny. Nursery Leaders Unite is here. That's awesome. Jeff Frederick says, I must be different than others. I've never been put off by this question. I've always seen it as a quick path to being able to talk about my beliefs. Yeah, that's great.
We're right there with you.
Yep. Nursery Leaders Unite says, get a nanny. Oh man. Wouldn't that be nice? Nursery Leaders Unite.
Being like nice. English royalty over there, getting a governess, you know.
Have you tried having more money?
Stay with the children. Yeah. Have you tried being wealthier?
I'll try it. I'll give
great.
that a shot.
Yeah. Let me just have more money.
Yeah. And then Jordan Keating says, isn't Mormonism a cult? I think you'll have to come to church on Sunday and find out.
Come and see, Jordan.
Yeah. Come and see. See what it's all about.
Yeah.
Okay.
And if you don't want to come on Sunday, come game with us at least.
Yeah, at least come beat us at Halo.
Yeah. We're terrible.
Yeah, it's bad.
All right. Let me pull up my screen. We'll get this party started. Okay, so this is from Ravix of Fourhorn. So he says, wife left the church. Hey y'all, my wife and I have been married for just under 2 years. Married in the temple. She's pretty much completely checked out of the church. She doesn't read the Book of Mormon. She listens to a lot of Exmo podcasts and stuff like that. For the last 5 months or so, I've been going to church alone. It's been really hard. We don't have any kids, but I'm anxious about how she'll handle church with the kids. I don't really see any avenue for her coming back. She told me she doesn't believe in the restoration at all, and she harbors a lot of hatred toward the church. It's pretty lonely. I've talked to my bishop about it. He listened, but didn't give me any super actionable advice. I sit alone at church every Sunday. I feel like I don't have anyone to talk to. I don't want to talk to my parents about it because she's pretty private about where she's at spiritually. All of my friends are her friends, so I don't really think I could talk to any of my friends about it. My ability to live the gospel is mostly not impeded. She gets super mad at me if I pay my tithing, and sometimes she tries to skip church. She tries to get me to skip church on Sundays. I've tried talking to her about her concerns, but she says all of my answers are just things apologists say, and she thinks I'm drinking the Kool-Aid. What should I do? All right, let's kick this out to you. What do you think? Give me your first reaction.
Yeah, first thing I would do if I was in that situation is just set some very clear boundaries of what's okay to talk about, what's not okay to talk about. One of those boundaries being like, I'm going to pay tithing, and if that's something we agreed on before, I'm going to do that. Let's set a clear understanding around. I would like to pay tithing, and let's get on the same level as that. And after that, it depends on where the marriage is and everything like that. It doesn't sound like they have any kids yet, so it's simplified a lot.
That does simplify things, yeah.
I feel like that there's a general panic in marriages or relationships when somebody goes through a big spiritual crisis like this. Yeah. And what I would say is that time is your friend, and just give everything as much time as possible, right? Focus on your relationship with God. Yeah. Find a balance between you and your wife, and still strive to be a valiant member of the church, and just let God work miracles through time, because that's really where you need to focus on. There are people who will leave the church and they'll say, I hate it, absolutely, I would burn it down if I could, and then years later they feel differently about it. Yeah. But I think you just got to give it as much time and space as possible.
Here's the deal. As I've gotten more into the online space for the church, I've noticed a pattern. And the pattern is when people leave the church and they're angry, their first knee-jerk reaction is, I need to start up a podcast, especially if they're women for some reason. And so they start up a podcast on Instagram, usually, and they just blast as much hate as they can. So, and there's actually a lot of raw emotions. There's a lot of tears. There's a lot of screaming. There's a lot of vulgarity. And you can sense man, these people they're going through something. They're hurt. They're probably not in a great space right now. So I think you're right. Give them some time. But you notice that after a while, their content starts to shift away from that anger-driven approach, and they start to they go into one or two directions. Either they start producing content that is just silly, like Alyssa Grenfell, where she's so scheduled on content now that she's she's trying to loop crumble cookies into the church now.
Yeah.
She's hey, let me tell you, or Dancing with the Stars. She'll dress up in a Dancing with the Stars costume and talk about why there are members of the church on Dancing with the Stars. And I'm man, that content barrel's got to be getting pretty empty there, Alyssa, but she's gone the silly route, just trying to connect everything to the church as she possibly can. But the other route is like a spiritual transformation route where you can see people saying, all right, maybe they don't come back, but maybe they start speaking a little bit friendlier about the church. And they start approaching it with a little bit more grace and a little bit more understanding, and a little bit of the vitriol is taken away out of the tone and the tenor of their podcast. So
Right.
I do
Well, to
see
that point, yeah. So that goes into like the boundaries. So maybe if I were in that situation, I would probably say, I'm not gonna I'm gonna stop dragging you to church because I was doing that before, and you don't want to go anymore.
Yeah,
But in return, I would like for you to stop consuming anti-content. Like, and just like, we're not going to speak negative of the church in our house, and I don't have to talk to you much about it, but in return, I don't want you consuming anti-content and arguing with me about it in our home. Just kind of create the spirit of negotiation at home. And then, like you
right.
said,
Because at the end of the day, you're married to each other. Like
yeah,
you have
you have to live
yoked
with each other.
yourselves together for better or worse, right? And so, like, if you're listening to content that goes against the very core belief system of your spouse, and that is cutting them to the core, and that they do not like, it would stand to reason that maybe some boundaries and some limits needs to be placed in that content consumption. For the sake of your spouse.
100%. Yeah, and if she has like earnest questions about like church history and things like that, maybe just sending her general conference talk after general conference talk is not going to be productive to the conversation.
Yeah.
Like maybe you got to let her figure stuff out. And Nursery Leaders Unite commented and said, "Is divorce an option?" And I think that's when I go back to time. Like, things like when you get married, it's in sickness and in health, right? That classic trope.
Totally.
And I feel like you need to see your spouse through as much as you can. Now, there might come a time where it's just like the change in leaving the church has affected so much else of your marriage that it's just not going to work, right?
It
You just
becomes
become
like a toxic and abusive relationship. And I don't mean physically abusive, of course, but like emotionally and mentally abusive. So like if they start just bombarding you with hate, and if they stop and if they start creating such a toxic environment that it begins to affect your family members, and your loved ones, maybe you should start considering a way out. Like if you've tried counseling, if you've tried working through this, if you have exhausted all other options, because it's a serious covenant that you're making. You're thick and thin. You exhaust all your options, but if they are still being toxic, I don't know. I think it's deeply personal, but I would say if it is a toxic and abusive relationship, probably get out of that. Is what I would say.
Well, yeah. So I would step back, have a really big conversation with your spouse about who they are, what they believe. Focus in on the things that still bond you together, your belief systems, the things that you still share, and build trust with each other in those things so you can eventually grow into, maybe she comes back to the church and you can share with, your spirit in your testimony with her through your example,
Totally.
I feel like people should know when they're in a bad way, and it's not going to get fixed.
But here's the thing. This is something that I've learned as I've become an adult. Like my wife and I, we talk about everything. Like we talk about a lot, and we talk a lot of religion. Like all the time, we're talking about religion almost every single day. And the older I've gotten, the more I realize that that's not necessarily the case for most couples. I know a handful of couples that they don't really talk to each other about serious things. Most of their conversations stay very surface level. And so their marriage actually operates like they're a couple of strangers in an elevator, and they're just like going somewhere. And so a lot of times you'll see couples, they're in this elevator together and they both think that they're on the same page. The wife hits like the eternal family button, and then the husband or the wife hits like floor 7, or floor 13. And it's just like, no, I'm getting out there. And then they just kind of awkwardly wait, listening to the music and just going like, oh, man. Talk with your spouse,
right?
For crying out loud. Counsel together. This is an equal partnership, that you are in. And so I would say, talk about spiritual things. If she has doubts, don't get scared. and don't parrot other people's opinions. She wants to hear your opinion, so you need to do the homework, figure out the answers for yourself. There's plenty of materials out there, but let it come from your own words, and let it be driven by love, and create something together, grow together through that trial. That would be something I say. But the other thing that this reminds me of, you remember there's this really wise prognosticator, President Nelson. You remember what he started saying as soon as he first became prophet? One of the first things he said, it'll become spiritually, it'll become impossible to spiritually survive without the constant influence of the Holy Ghost, in coming days. So this is part of what we're seeing there. This is a sifting moment here. And so, so we're seeing that. He's also been very big on receiving personal revelation. He's been big on staying away from social media. We have never had a prophet institute as many social media fasts as President Nelson. And is he doing that because he's scared that you'll see something or that you'll hear something, some part of church history that you never knew before and it'll scare you out of your testimony? No, I think what he's seeing is that there are a lot of people that are fueled by hatred and doubt that are actively benefiting from your content. And so there are people out there that will give you a sympathetic ear and say like, oh, come share your voice, share your story on our podcast, give us engagement, get us the clicks, get us the money. And then they send you on your way. The church is set up to support and provide a system of help and encouragement to you in spiritual health for you, no matter where you go in the world, every single week, through thick and thin, where social media just kind of lives and dies on its own, But so, I mean, I hear a lot of the prophet's words in a lot of this. I see a lot of his words coming to pass where I think the brethren have been warning about social media for a really long time because algorithms have become increasingly more addictive. Phones have become increasingly addictive. AI has become addictive. We're becoming addicted to these things. We're detaching from our local communities and from each other. And that's kind of scary. Now social media can be used for many great things. And there are a lot of great benefits to it. But I do see a lot of these algorithms as dark, slippery, misty paths that can definitely cause a spouse to begin to question, especially if they're not doing the things at home that they should be. So if they're not heeding that counsel of studying the scriptures, getting revelation every single day, trying to keep the spirit with them, they're going to see that stuff. They're going to be like, oh my goodness, I've been had. Because their arguments, they make sense if you don't think about them. If you don't consider the path of where that leads you, their argument, they are not their brother's keeper. They just say, all right, you know what? No right, no wrong, no rules for you. Now go out and have fun, and go out, leave the church. You've been bamboozled. You've been hoodwinked, just like me.
Well, and you can find online any community that will validate anything that you're feeling, right? If I sat down at night, I'm like, man, I really like kicking puppies. I'm sure I could go online and I could tune my algorithm into finding a whole puppy kicking community where they just go around and they tell you all the coolest puppies to kick and how hard to kick them, and it's the algorithm is insane on that front. It's gross what people will find and what people will share about themselves, to the point where you find entire communities, formed off of the weirdest mental deficiencies.
Right. Well, when we were growing up, there was always that saying that you heard it all the time. We are in the age of information, right? I believe that we have gone past that age and that now we are in the age of revelation. I think we are inundated with information right now. And it's on us to figure out what's actually true and what is actually false. What is eternally true and what seems nice but may not be actually true and beneficial. So let's catch up with the chat. Anything we need to catch up on there?
Nursery Leaders Unite said, is divorce an option? We talked about that. He says, sorry guys, the transactional approach to marriage leads to ruin, which totally. I can kind of see where you're going there. But I mean, marriage itself is a transaction. So there's a little bit of you still have to negotiate. You still have to play some sort of, games there, but, well, not games, but yeah, no. I get what you're saying. No,
I totally agree. The brownie point system, if you are doing brownie points, you're in a dangerous place.
Yeah, don't do that.
If you're in the brownie point place where you're like, well, I got to do this because I did this, and then you keep score and you become mental accountants and you're always watching each other. That's not a good place to be in.
No, absolutely not. Yeah, but is there give and take? When do you have to negotiate that sometime? Absolutely. But yeah, do not play trivial games for sure. And then Deej says to Jordan, it's not a cult. Hey, we found the answer. We're not in a cult.
Hey, look at that.
Look at that.
Woo. Thanks, social media.
Sweet. I knew it.
So
awesome.
To wrap this all up, I do want to make a point on this because I think this gets at a bigger question. And the bigger question is, why do we struggle so hard in the church to date the right way? I feel like we have a big dating problem. And so what I mean by that is let me tell you the average dating process. So you go to college. If you're a young woman, you might go on a mission. Young men, typically will go on a mission. You go to college, you meet somebody, and then you put them through your parameters. And the parameters are you a member of the church? For men, for return missionaries, it's like, okay, is this woman a member of the church? Yes or no? If yes, then marriage. And then for women, it's, are you an RM? Yes or no? If yes, then marriage. And that is a recipe for disaster, okay? Because marriage is so idiosyncratic. There are so many things that you just don't anticipate with that kind of a mindset. So the reason why I bring this up is because I think there is this idea in business, okay? So in business, let's say you were given a loan, like $1 million loan, and you had to go buy a business. Would you just say, is it a business, yes or no? And then just buy a business? I imagine you would probably do a little bit of homework. They call it due diligence in the business world. And so the due diligence you would do, you'd figure out, okay, well, how are they doing? Let me see some. You probably want to see some reports. You probably want to get into their financials. You probably want to figure some things out. Like, okay, well, how are they growing? Are they shrinking right now? How is morale in the company? What's going on? You would do probably as much research as you possibly could and figure out, is this going to be a good business for me to buy, or is this going to bankrupt me spiritually, or financially? So I think members do a terrible job with due diligence. And the reason why is, as soon as they got those parameters down, they're like, okay, a member of the church, great. They immediately get physical. And then the hormones take the driver's seat and they drive that relationship straight into marriage. And then like a year later, you'll see like, oh man, I didn't know that I married someone who was like abusive, like physically abusive. Like I had a teacher in Rexburg who was an attorney. He was like, yeah, you would be surprised the amount of women that marry a guy, think he's great, and then realize that he's like physically abusive, and then have to get a divorce.
Yeah.
Or you might marry someone, if you're Orthodox, you might marry someone that you think is Orthodox, but if you let your hormones drive that car, then guess what? You're not going to really pay attention too well to what they're actually doing, and their actions will tell you where their belief system is, because we act out our belief systems, And so, So anyway, you were going to say something. I cut you off. Go ahead.
To your point there, like, I don't even know if that qualifying question of are they a member or not is even relevant anymore. Like, I don't even think that should be a question that you ask.
Why do you say that?
Do they believe in God? Yes. Do they believe in Christ? Is Christ the Savior? Yes. How do they feel about the Book of Mormon? Those are the three questions. You should start going down that. But like, whether or not they go to church every Sunday, that doesn't actually tell you a whole lot about their testimony. You know, like, it doesn't tell you where they are on their spiritual journey. So turning off your brain and saying, hey, I see them at church every Sunday, that means that we're totally aligned on all our beliefs and we'll be totally fine. Right. Absolutely not. That gives you very little information. What you do know about them is they are punctual and consistent, which are both good things, right? But that is not going to get you through a whole lifetime on earth together, right? So like, I think that use those, maybe like a small, like, sub qualifying question of like, maybe I should ask them on a date because I see him at church. It's why not? It's definitely not harmful to qualify him on that front. But like, as a when you're considering for marriage, I would dig much deeper, and people don't do that, like you're saying.
That's the thing, is when you're considering for marriage, you should be as judgmental as possible, and rightly so. You shouldn't feel bad about being judgmental when it comes to marriage, because this is the biggest decision that you will make. And your marriage can make or break you as a man and as a husband and as a father. And so the idea is that you need to make sure that you figure out, create like an actual list. And my mission president had me do this before I went home, and I was really grateful for it, because he said, write down all the qualities that you want in your future spouse, everything that's important to you. You've just had a bunch of time spent with different mission companions. You've got to live with different companions and figure out what you like and what you don't like. Now figure it all out, put it all down. So I actually had a paper, and it was funny. My in-laws, they busted my chops. I was the butt of the joke for such a long time because I took so long to get married. I took a whopping 6 months to propose to Chanel, okay? And so, but they were like, oh, it took so long to get married, Aiden, the deal is, I was very careful with dating. Some guys go out there and they hunt with a spoon, and they're like, yeah. I'm out there with a sniper rifle, okay? And what I mean by that is,
you're
like,
a camper, yeah.
I'm a camper. I'm just waiting. I'm like, I'm gonna line this up. I was
bide my time.
David O. McKay said, you want to date with your eyes, like before marriage, you date with your eyes wide open. After marriage, you keep your eyes half closed, And so I was keeping my eyes wide open, and with Chanel, I tell you, I was just watching for like six months. I was just figuring out, like, how does she handle stress? All right. Well, have I seen her angry? Have I seen her in a stressed position? Have I seen her in her worst? And is that something that I can handle?
Right.
And how does she actually spend time doing her scripture study? And have I accidentally, or like, have I seen her take time to actually nurture her testimony, or does she just go with her roommates? There were things that I had created. I created a list because I was like, the church is big medicine for me. I'm not going to marry someone who doesn't take it seriously. And so I created a handful of lists of, like, if someone takes the church seriously, they will be doing X, Y, and Z, And so I bided my time. I waited. I didn't get physical at all with her because I'm like, I don't want those hormones driving the car. So, like, at the end of the date, I would say goodbye. I would salute. I would wave. I would high five. But I was just like, no, not today. And I mean, a lot of people would think, yeah, that's, how dare you? That's so mean. No. The thing is, I found out she was the right one for me, and we have had 10 beautiful, amazing years together, and I'd attribute a lot of that because I figured out that we would work together. The thing is, in marriage, you have two types of problems. There are solvable problems, and then there are gridlock problems. The solvable problems are all situational based, like, oh, yeah, we're living apart and I don't like it, but that's going to solve itself as soon as you move back together. Maybe when the internship is over, you're done. Now, the gridlock problems are ones that are tied to your core values and your belief systems. And so the idea is you want to make sure that you have, whoever you're going to marry, you have as little gridlock problems as possible. The less you're gridlocking with that person, the more in sync you're going to be, and the easier time you're going to have in marriage. And so a lot of people don't understand that. A lot of people just turn the blind eye. They keep their eyes half closed while they're dating, and then they end up marrying people with a lot of gridlock issues. Where it's like, oh, yeah, I didn't realize you don't want kids. I want 7. Yeah, and, right. Oh no, I didn't realize that your career ambitions are going to lead you down this path. I don't want that, and I never wanted that, and things like that. So there's a lot of that you can avoid if you do your due diligence. And I know I'm crazy by saying this. I know I'm the crazy one by saying all of that, but that's my piece.
Yeah. Well, final note on the whole question about divorce and wives being, leaving the church. We didn't even touch on, this is all, this hypothetical was without kids. So we didn't even touch about, like, if they had kids, how that works. That's a whole other conversation.
Forget about it.
Yeah, that one's rough. So yeah, we'll have to touch on that one another time. But yeah, in this, like, fresh, newly married, you're having this this thing happen right now. That's the advice we would give on that. But yeah, let's talk another time about if you had kids involved, because that's a whole lot more complicated.
Yeah. Any comments that we need to catch up on?
Yeah, Deej says, my wife and kids and I always talk about the gospel and cultural issues. We decided a long time ago that we would be intentional with inoculating our kids from the insanity of today's culture.
There
Now
you
we have
go.
kids who are well adjusted, but they are entering the dating scene, and it seems there are few organic ways for them to meet people. Yeah,
Yeah.
dating is impossible now.
I am so glad that I dated before social media became big. Like before all the dating apps came out, like they were starting to come out when I was dating, but they were still too new, you know? And so
Oh yeah.
but I have heard stories about how terrible they are. I have seen the catfishing videos and all the pranks and stuff like that. So I
Well,
do not envy that position. Yeah.
our older brother Carter had a great idea. He wants to create an app that's for parents, that you get together and you secretly start, like, influence your children to, marry these other kids. It's like a matchmaking arranged marriage, but not official. Like covert arranged marriage,
There you
where you
go.
start introducing kids of same values and just hope they hit it off. So I feel like you might betray your kids' trust, if they ever found out about that. But hey, if you're subtly just navigating your kids' dating life before that even happens, like years in advance, could work out well.
The thing is, okay, here's the deal. I actually knew a family who, if one of their kids was about to marry somebody, they would bring the fiance or the boyfriend or the girlfriend to meet the entire family, and then ultimately the decision was left to the parents of whether or not that kid was going to be allowed into the family. And at the first time I heard that, I was like, that's ridiculous. How insane. But the older I get, and the more the more miles I get under my feet, the more I realize, like, hey, that's actually a pretty good idea, because there are some parents out there that can see things that their kids can't see, and that might have experience enough to say, like, hey, I'm seeing some red flags. Let's talk about this. Because I mean, this person is going to be a part of their family too. I mean, that marriage doesn't just involve those two people. It's like if you're gonna have kids, that brings grandkids. You're gonna have in-laws, grandkids, and you're gonna have like the siblings, in-law, and stuff like that. So I mean, it is a huge decision. And so I mean, what are your thoughts on, should we go back to that? Should we make arranged marriages? Not necessarily. It wasn't arranged, but it was just like family approval. Do you need family approval on marriage?
Like your father's blessing, or your wife's father's blessing?
Yeah.
Yeah, well, I mean, it was our dad who actually introduced me to Hannah, which was interesting. So that was he had good, he had good insight into that, and it worked out really well, obviously.
Yeah.
But as a kid, would I have said, like, would I, give that power to my parents to choose a wife for me? Absolutely not. As a parent, that's all I want, is that power.
Yeah.
Like, I understand the double standard there. But that's all I want, is like, please let me choose someone for you, because this is a big decision and it's scary. And I feel like I know best for my kids right now, but they've got to go choose that. I feel like they have to make that choice for themselves. It should hold sway. Like, your family's opinion should hold sway. If you have good relationships with your kids and you're earnest for their well-being, then it will. As long as you're doing well with your kids, then that should work out. But yeah, arranged marriages have, like, if you look at some studies, some of them work out pretty well. So I don't know. I don't know.
Yeah.
Deej in the comments says we need to make that app. So
all right.
Who knows?
Well, I mean, and who knows if this is going to be, I mean, with the last conference talk that President Nelson came out with, I've got like this running theory that the second coming is going to happen a lot sooner than most people realize. And so, I mean, who knows? Our kids may not even have to worry about that. But hey, I mean, ours are younger. Ours aren't entering the dating scene, so that's what I'm hoping for, at least. It's just like, hey,
I've got like
we can just hang in there long enough that the millennium comes, that isn't a problem anymore.
Problem solved. Yep.
Yeah.
Absolutely.
Okay.
Cool.
Alrighty. Well, if I think that's probably a good place to end it. And
awesome.
So, okay. Well, let's plug the Discord real quick. Let's give that a plug.
Yeah,
let you take the wheel.
dadsneedfriends.com. We game together and we talk about other things. We have workshops going, which have been really cool, of just sharing knowledge from one dad to another. Lots of memes, lots of discussions on faith, which are fun. We game Wednesday nights and sometimes on the weekend. We're feeling a little crazy, you know? So
We might even be
come,
gaming tonight. Yeah.
that's true, actually. I think there are a couple people jumping on right after this live stream. So
Yeah.
come and game with us. Discuss
So how much
the
money are we
burdens.
talking about? Like how much monthly payment are we asking for?
A whole lot of nothing, actually. This is all for free. This counts as my community service. I'm
Some
gonna
men
tell
just
my
want to
parole
watch the
officer.
world burn.
Yeah, for
That's
real.
right.
We're a bunch of we're running our own digital commune over there. That's what we're doing. So come
Yeah,
join us. Be monks. You know.
totally.
Yeah, it's a fun time.
Okay. All right. With that, I'm Hayden Holm. This is Tanner, and we are Salty Saints.